Welcome everyone, Dr. Linda here. What we're going to cover in this lecture is the introduction to anatomy and physiology. So what exactly is anatomy and what is physiology? Now, simply put, very simply put, when we look at the term anatomy, we are talking about human structure. And when we talk about physiology, we're talking about function. So anatomy and physiology is really the study of structure and function. Many of the textbooks of anatomy and physiology, sometimes they're called form and function. So we're going to be looking at many structures, and you should be able to identify the structures. And at the same point in time, you should be thinking, hey, do I know what this does? What is its function? So anatomy and physiology is the study of human structure and function. When you look at the structure of a shoulder joint, when we look at bones, understanding how that joint is articulated helps you understand how it's going to move. A shoulder joint has a different structure than does the elbow joint. And because they're different structure, they're going to function differently. When we study human anatomy and we look at all the different reference points, whether we're looking at the palm, whether we're looking at the knee, whether we're looking at the clavicle, whether we're looking at the shoulder joint or elbow joint or fingers, we have to have a reference point that we're starting with. And that reference point is called anatomical position. When we talk about anatomical position, it is this young lady here standing with her feet flat on the floor. The palms are facing forward, and we're looking at her from the anterior view. So there's some new words there, right? You heard me say anterior. The term anterior means we're looking at the individual from the front, whereas the posterior would be the side of her that we cannot see. So palms are facing forward is the key. And the reason why that's important is with the palms facing forward, the thumb is the first digit and the pinky is the fifth digit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. From anatomical position, the thumb is considered lateral and the pinky is considered medial. So now these are two new terms, lateral and medial. Lateral means further away, and medial means it's closer to the midline of the body. That's what medial means. Not median, not medium, medial, ending with the L. Okay, so this is anatomical position. We always study human anatomy from this position. So again, anatomical position, hands are at the side, palms are facing forward or anterior. There's another term, supine. Supine and prone, both of these, the individual is lying down, but supine, the person is face up, whereas prone, they're face down. So how do you remember this? If you're face up, but you're lying down, but you're face up, you're lying on your spine. If you're lying on your spine, you are lying supine. And if you're face down, you're lying on your nose. You're lying on that bone called your nose. So you're lying on the bone, you are prone. When you're lying on your spine, you're supine, face up. So little tricks. So here, this has shown up in the past on some Connect quiz, and this would have been like one of the questions. Okay, so the person's facing down. Well, is that anatomical position, fetal position, prone, or supine? Well, we said supine was lying on the spine, which they're not. They're lying on their nose, which is the bone, and that is prone. Prone is on the bone. This has shown up in the past also on a Connect quiz, and it was like drag and drop. So they would have these pictures and you would have these terms off to the side. You would like left click and then drag and drop the appropriate words next to the, in the slot or in the box. So this individual here, right, this is supine. They're lying on their spine. They are lying face up, and supine is the opposite of prone. So let's go to the bottom one. The bottom one, they're lying on their bone, which is prone. They are lying face down, and in prone is the opposite of supine. So what is this one in the middle? They are standing erect. The hands are facing anteriorly or forward. This is what we call anatomical position. They are standing upright, and the feet are flat on the floor. Okay, so you see how we put all this information together? Fantastic. When we look at anatomy, we can look at anatomy macroscopically, right, looking at an individual as a whole, or we can look at the smaller parts, which is microscopic anatomy. Like if we're looking at cells or we're looking at molecules, these are things that you can't necessarily see with the naked eye, so we need a microscope. When we study cells, we call it cytology. This term cyte equals cell. So you're going to hear words when you're reading through your chapters. You will hear things like osteocyte, adipocyte, hepatocyte, cardiomyocyte, chondrocyte. These are referring to what type of cell they are. So if it is an astrocyte, it's a cell that looks like a star. If it is a hepatocyte, hepato means liver, it's a liver cell. If it's an osteocyte, osteo is bone, it is a bone cell. When cells come together, they make tissues, and the study of tissues is histology. Histology is the study of tissues. So when we look at levels of organization, we start at the smallest, which is number one, which is chemistry. We're made up of chemicals, whether it's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. These are atoms. Or chemicals can also be like biochemistry, right? Like carbohydrates and proteins and fats, which are really just made up of carbons, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and the way they're organized defines whether it's a carbohydrate or whether it's a amino acid or whether it's a fat. So when a bunch of chemicals come together, we create a cell. And when a bunch of cells come together, we create tissues. And when we have a bunch of tissues that are working together in harmony to create similar function, we now create an organ. In this case, it looks like we're talking about the stomach. And then when we have a bunch of organs that come together that work in harmony, like the esophagus and the small intestine and the large intestine and the stomach, we have a bunch of organs coming together. Now it creates a system. In this case, the digestive system. But there's 11 systems, right? There's the immune system and the cardiovascular system and the musculoskeletal system and the reproductive system. There's a whole bunch of systems that we will talk about in a second. When all 11 systems come together, now you get the crowning creation of all, the organism. Okay? If there is any abnormality at any of these levels, like if your chemistry is off, if you don't have enough protein, but you have enough carbs and fats, that's going to affect how the cells are produced. And you'll see when you do the cell this week, especially the cell membrane or the cell wall, it's composed of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and they all have unique function. And we know people on these strict diets where they're on a low fat diet or a high carb diet, or they don't have any fat in their diet, or they eliminate one of the three, isn't ideal. Your body has use for carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. Now, all of our biochemistry is a little bit different. Each of us have a different biochemical individuality. So perhaps your biochemical individuality processes fats better than you may process protein. Person number two may process carbohydrates great, but person number three just looks at bread and they gain weight, right? So everyone's a little bit different. So to say that there should be a 40-30-30 breakdown when you eat, or everyone should be on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet or a vegetarian diet or a pescatarian diet is nonsense. There is no one way of eating. It's unique for each individual. I have taken care of many vegans who have been very sick, And when they went to consuming some animal products, they got healthier. I have met many ketogenic diet and carnivore people who had become very sick, and once they switched and started eating more vegetarian-based foods, they regained their health. So it's the right tool for the right job. Each of us is different, and as long as you're feeling well and you're functioning well and you're healthy, then that's the right formulation in terms of diet and nutrition for you. What's good for you now may not be good for you in 5 to 10 years from now. It's always changing, never static. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, let me pause here and see if anyone has any questions, and then we'll move on to the next section.